Hi guys, this is gsn.com and I'm here with the iPhone 14 Pro as it says here. Well, someone messed up when they sent me the box and they included actually the lid of another iPhone, the one with a notch. You can ignore this and let's see the actual device. Now the phone should be priced at around $1,099 this year and it's basically a successor to the iPhone 13 Pro with a few welcome extras. They got rid of the notch, they placed a 48 megapixel camera here, the Apple A16 processor inside, a selfie camera with autofocus, and at the same time we now have always on display in the lock screen with some customization. So this is the iPhone 14 Pro, which is part of the quartet of the iPhone 14 models this year, which includes the iPhone 14, 14 Plus, 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. Okay, so let's see what's inside the box. Even though there's not much here over the past years, Apple has gotten rid of the accessories. So we start off with this little envelope where you can find the sticker with the Apple logo and some useful information about the device, plus the key used to access the slots. Here in Europe we still have the SIM card slot, while in USA it's only eSIM, which will be the future, I think. And also in the box we have this cable going from USB-C to Lightning, which is something that will also change as the European Union forces Apple to go full USB-C, which they've already done on their iPads. Okay, so putting everything back in here, and I have some things to tell you about the handset. The color we have here, it's called silver. There's one called deep purple, inspired by the name of a band or simply by the color of the ear, which should be a sort of purple, or as they call it, very berry. Anyway, so 4 color hues for the handset, and if you want to talk about the design, it's very similar to the iPhone 13 Pro. We actually have one here. Now, I'm not sure if you can see this, but the thickness of the camera has grown. You can see the thickness of the 13 Pro here and the thickness of the camera module on the 14 Pro. There's been a growth here, especially on account of the main sensor, which is now something like 50 or 60% bigger than the one of the 13 Pro. We still have a stainless steel frame with a thickness of 7.9 millimeters compared to the predecessor 7.7 millimeters, and the weight is 206 grams, which is actually only 2 grams heavier than the model from last year. Now, we have glass at the front side, we also have glass at the back side, and once again, stainless steel frame. Rest assured, we still have IP68 certification. It feels like a pretty buff and solid device, and as you can see for yourselves here, we have a dynamic island now. We no longer have a notch, and this dynamic island can actually expand and show features inside of applications. Okay, so you can see our website here. Now I think it's time to discuss the display. The panel hasn't changed very much, at least on paper, from the predecessor. It's still a 6.1-inch OLED, this time LTPO, which means when in always on display mode it can go as low as 1 Hz, and when you need it to be, it can go up to 120 Hz in gaming or scrolling lists. The resolution is 2556 over 1179 pixels. It's a Super Retina panel with HDR10 support and also Dolby Vision. The brightness goes up to 2000 nits, which is pretty impressive in my book. And I should also probably mention that, once again, no notch here. Actually, instead of a notch, we have a pill and a punch hole which have been coupled together, and they can expand and create a dynamic island. So let's see some examples of that. For example, if you're recording something, if I start recording here and I exit the app, you can see it continuing here as I do other things. As you can see, it basically annexes the pixels next to it and expands the area. Now the same goes, you can definitely jump straight to it, the same goes from Spotify. So if I start listening to a Joe Rogan podcast here and play it, if I leave the app, the playback will continue here at the top of the screen in this island, dynamic island, as you can see for yourself. And those are just some examples. The same goes for the video. So if I watch a video here and I leave the application, guess what? It's placed in the dynamic island in the dynamic fashion. That's what its purpose is. And of course, you can also do the timer. So if I start a timer now and I leave it, I can actually see it going on there. That's the purpose, aside from making that whole pill feel a bit more immersed within the black background of the screen. Okay, dynamic island covered. These are just some of the uses, and I actually have a page here open which shows you all the apps and features that support the dynamic island. We have incoming calls, AirPods connected, Face ID, Apple Pay, car key, AirDrop, watch unlock, charging, NFC, ongoing calls, timers, and yes, Apple Maps is part of the package. Okay, so if I go to Maps and I want to find something like, I don't know, this one here, directions, okay, drive, go, and if I leave the app, you can see here I'm being directed still from the dynamic island, which is quite nice to see. Now that we're done with this, I think it's time to discuss the innards of the phone, because we've covered the exterior and the screen. This phone has an Apple A16 processor, which is a new CPU, a 4nm CPU made by TSMC. It's a hexa-core unit with a 5-core GPU. Keep in mind that the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus only have the Apple A15, so that's a plus. We also have 6 gigs of RAM, 128, 256, 512 or 1 terabyte of storage, and also a 3200 mAh battery, which should charge at 50% in 30 minutes. The predecessor, the iPhone 13 Pro, had a 3095 mAh unit, so there's a growth here of about something like 105 mAh. I took the liberty of also taking a benchmark on Antutu. That's the score I achieved here. It's pretty underwhelming. I've seen Android phones, I think there are 10 of them or more, which can achieve over 1 million points. Still, benchmark nowadays, you know, they may be a bit subjective. Anyway, back to the features. We also have here something called accident detection on this handset. So using the accelerometer, using the barometer and microphones, it can detect you've been in a car crash and call the authorities. We have stereo speakers, which is the one at the bottom here and the one at the top combined. And we also have the lightning port here at the bottom. Speaking of connectivity, this device provides you with features like Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.3, 5G, NFC, and GPS dual band. And I think it's high time we also started referring to other features like, well, the front camera, for example. It's embedded here right next to the 3D sensor for face unlock and also for your bokeh needs. And this year, we're dealing with a 12 megapixel new sensor camera with autofocus and f1.9 aperture. This is the front camera once again, and if you go to the back side, there have been changes made. We have a 48 megapixel main sensor with f1.8 aperture, which combines 4 pixels in one to take 12 megapixel shots. We have dual pixel phase detection autofocus and Sensor Shift OIS, meaning that the sensor shifts together with the lens in order to compensate for your movements. There is a 12 megapixel telephoto camera with 3x optical zoom and optical image stabilization, and a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera which also has autofocus, which means we're going to be taking macros. This is the dual LED dual tone flash, and this is the LiDAR sensor, which should help us with our bokeh needs and even extract objects from the area around. In spite of the rumors, this camera cannot capture 8K video just yet. Okay, there's also another interesting feature which we have here. So if I go into the camera, you can see the gradations of zooms. So we have 0.5, which is ultra wide. We have 2 and 3. 2 is something new. It's achieved from the main camera by cropping. 3 is actually optical zoom, and once again 2 is achieved like that. Now let's try and find novelties. So panorama, we already knew it. There's portrait, there's photo here, there's video with this brand new action mode, which is basically a gimbal replacement. You can shoot up to 2.8K, and I've seen tests comparing it to the Super Steady on the Galaxy S22 Ultra. To be honest, it smokes the Galaxy Ultra. Cinematic can now be captured in 4K, which is basically your bokeh video and a bit more. Time-lapse and slow-mo are also available. Okay, I'm pretty sure I forgot something because there are a lot of features available here, but one thing I won't forget is the fact that we now have a always-on display. Now let me just close up some of the apps we have here, like this one, and if I do something like this and leave it alone, you'll see here the always-on display will dim the wallpaper and show a bunch of useful widgets. Now this experience is actually customizable, so you can go to the settings, you can go to the wallpaper, and you can do the customization from here. And by the way, you can select those beautiful wallpapers to be applied, moon or the earth. And here you can add the widgets you desire. I added the stock ones. You can also add battery ones, calendar ones, reminders, and a few more, including something, for example, this one, or birthdays taken from Facebook and other things like that. You can also customize the fonts. You can also apply customizations to the regular wallpaper in color, gradient, photos, and even apply a sort of blur. That's depending on your preference. And by the way, you should also be able to customize fonts and colors here for the numbers shown on the lock screen, and it's always on display feature. By the way, here I'm being shown on the map the place where I'm at on the earth. Another interesting feature of iOS 16, aside from the customizable lock screen and those two widgets, which by the way I wish we had more, is something called visual lookups. So if I take this photo of me and keep it pressed, I can actually cut myself from the picture and even share this cutout, copy it or share it, paste it in a document and share it with the people closest to me as a PNG file. And that's just one example. We can also cut, as far as I know, pets. And here we should be able to cut a whole group of persons from this picture and move it or share it with other people. That's the power of the LiDAR sensor, I think. Okay, so in a nutshell, there are few changes and there are other aesthetic ones. If you didn't love the notch, now it's gone, or better said, replaced by the dynamic island. The design remains pretty much the same as last year, but we now have a much more powerful main camera, which is, as I said before, depending on the main sensor, 48 megapixel with up to 50% bigger sensor than the past year. And the secondary cameras are up to 3 times better in low light than their predecessor. So a lot of expectations here and a lot to explore over the next days. This has been the unboxing and first impression for the iPhone 14 Pro. We'll be back with more very soon. Goodbye.